The Cynic and Extremis. Poems by Jacob M. Appel. Narrated by John Bernys. Visiting Allumus. I once sat in those very chairs, I say, like you, which isn't strictly true, as I was a rather restive, twitchy scamp, and those low-slung tube steel seats must be in their umpteenth incarnation. But I do recall assembling for visitant grandees a lieutenant governor's aide, some undersung chalk-cheeked fellow who'd given his prime and his surname to novel methods for extracting buite. How the faculty fussed for those men. Now I have joined their ranks, all of my own grade school teachers, dead or nearly so, pretty Miss Teal and plain Miss Kelly and Doc Horton. 5th grade, who dressed as Captain Kidd each Halloween and later drowned. Never again will Mrs. Serpinski trap a rat in Separate. How could she? She'd be well past 100. I had not even realized until now. And all of those embryonic faces, as yet untainted. What's to be shared? Nothing, of course. Or nothing I dare. Divulge the fleeting ways of goldfish, of parents, that all doors exist, doubts festering, awaiting a stubborn, spiteful flame that always sparks too late. Color inside the lines or out. Summer camp socials. We journeyed by decommissioned school bus to all-girls camps wedged into lakefront Berkshire notches, most now defunct, where Scarsdale bankers sent their daughters to weave lanyards, wire poked through gashes in the vinyl seats. A toxic residue of antiperspirant choked the twilight. In the makeshift ballrooms, gymnasiums, mood-lit refectories, a converted hay barn painted mauve. Slender thighs flashed through clouds of Malibu musk. Boys breathed Banaka like fire, savored the first fruity ting of Maybelline kissing potion. I hugged the corners like a dunce. At one camp, there was a bald girl, pale, lanky, not unpretty, but without so much as an eyebrow. Her pregnant white scalp, latticed with veins, on the bus. Guys called her Kojak, snotted about parts. She didn't need to shave. Nobody ever asked her to dance, yet her laughter carried across the sultry ether. This girl stars in the revision of my life. I stride across the dance floor on fumes of bravado, let her faint waist melt into my trembling fingertips. She ripples with joy, but not surprise, because she has known I am coming, because she's been waiting. In my unrevised life, she is still waiting. Touring Grenwick Village. Spouses of dentists, wives, and one husband, and only me to guide them. The dentists are in an air-conditioned ballroom near Midtown, absorbing the latest advances in articulating paper. I'd expected the wives and one husband to have better teeth. I had never given consideration to the spouses of dentists, which is likely why I agreed to lead this tour. Walking backward on a summer day is hell on the calves. Willa Cather lived here, I say. Sarah Teasdale died there. Dental spouses nod politely, displaying chipped canines. I might add, this is where a poet whose name you wouldn't recognize wrote about a bridge I could easily tell you. Next, I might say, this is the spot where Hannibal led his elephants across the Alps, and over there, beyond that bus stop, hunchbacked Richard III, who may not actually have been hunchbacked, fell to Henry Tudor, and there, yes, right where you're all standing, brave Theodopides proclaimed the Athenian victory over Persia before collapsing fatally onto the asphalt. At this moment, you spouses of dentists, I feel drained as Theodopides, his marathon complete. Only that man saved civilization, while I stand on blistered feet, watching you gawp at me, with your poor occlusion, your ashy crowns, knowing we are leagues beyond rescue. Concurrences. In the infusion suite of this storied hospital, which will be scrapped for condos, I spot my third-grade teacher, who will soon be dead. Carved hollow, yet still spring in her smile, how easily she salved a bee sting. Poultice scrapes, found magic in the dull reiterations of childhood. You will not remember, yet she does, down to that sailor's bucket cap, the unmatched socks, her eyes graze approval. Over my stethoscope. I have a boy in third grade now. Hard to believe, while we're here. He's studying fractions and decimals. Yes, she says sprightly, as though of strangers, and while I drilled your fractions, someone's teacher stared up at this very ceiling, poison flowing through her veins. Below fragile skies. The doomed facade bides unnoticed, fractured brickwork dumb, gargoyles lurking. On the sidewalk, tenants buzz and flutter. Mrs. Pasternak, who will lose a son in Korea. Dr. Epps, who will lose an eye to lymphoma. Skull, our toothless, round-backed super, who carries loss like a bowl of stew. I watch from the bay window. After midday, threats of the deluge. Wrappers swirl around trash cans. A crisp, harried breeze chills the nape of old Rabbi Sellers, soon to remarry. Then rain. Gladys Krim skirts the corner, oblivious to the rumbling eaves, shielding her schoolbooks under her angora, dotting homely, mouse-eared Gladys, who was to be a neonatal nurse in Pittsburgh, a godsend to gasping infants, and to raise 3 healthy boys of her own. She had forgotten her umbrella. I think often of those children, adults now, wondering where they are, as I hug the curb while I walk. Coop. Our widowed neighbor, adrift and warped, like sea-bleached wood, befriends pigeons, and feeds them homemade chicken scratch in the courtyard. The ratbirds despoil rhododendrons and azaleas with droppings. Diseased feathers speckle the benches, float on the shoals of the fountain. At the core of her maelstrom, Mrs. Z models a gospel of privation. Drafted as an envoy by the Coop Board. To shoo off this nuisance, I feign neighborly cheer as I wipe off a perch beside her. She holds her shoulders stiff, neck taut like a royal ibis or a Nubian stork god, exulting amidst her flock. When I was a boy, I say, my maiden aunt took me to feed crusts to geese at a local pond. I thought myself a benefactor, but I was just clogging up their guts and wasting food. Pigeons are not geese, says Mrs. Z. She sews an arc of millet and safflower across the slate, a sweeping gesture of unyielding kindness that might obliterate the earth. Infidelity. A kiss stolen on the fire escape, and the world does not end. Bridges fail to crumble. No clocks strike 13. I am drunk. She is drunk. Even the kids appear drunk, although only high on sugar and inadequate supervision. A Rubicon forded, like a first cup of coffee or joint. For my aunt, the point of no return is a suicide. Note dispatched through the post. For my grandfather, nearly a rabbi, the afternoon his brigade liberated. Buchenwald, afterward, his god, neither lives nor dies, but hibernates. A hydrant waiting for a fire. Now I am, like him, with no insurance, aflame in my belief that houses never burn. RMS Lusitania departs for Liverpool. Through a sea of bowlers and boaters and crinoline glide the notables, stoop-shouldered Vanderbilt, Saurian, moon-crowned Frohman, drawing cheers, reflected funnels, ghost, dance in the uneasy surf. Brine steams off the jetty whistles like bayonets. Saw passage for a necklace matron atop a sedan chair. Vendors in newsboy caps hawk 48-star flags, cigars, sprays of oxeye daisies. A steerage-bound girl, church-scrubbed, scraggy, whisks past an apple cart in the grasp of her elder sister. Her gaze magnetized by the mounds of polished fruit. Up soars the gangway. Round grinds the anchor, then kisses. Champagne, banjo strumming ragtime off the quarterdeck. Momentary flutter, pier side. As an electrified phaeton storms the throng like cavalry. Doors opening in motion, out flies its imperious mutton-chopped driver, ranting at the harbourmaster, while footman hoists parcels from the carriage. Oaths ricochet like gape shot. When the apple vendor recalls that balmy morning, so many decades later, he'll speak of this imperious latecomer who catches the final tug out of port. Some days, he'll cup an apple into the smooth, cool palm of the blossoming girl. Some days, his grip closes around hers, holding them both afloat. Trick-or-treating in suburbia. How soon dusk settles over the crusted lawns and the pinched air, pregnant with frost. Whips at the ears, yet no caprice of wind or time can restrain my son, a 9-year-old Galen, wielding a tinfoil scalpel for one evening. He is the real doctor, while I serve merely as gristled chaperone. His tiny arms swim inside his great white coat. Our home base is my mother's house, my boyhood home, a neighborhood chosen for the proximity of its dwellings. All speed and fervor, the boy leads me to doorsteps, which could be portals where he lived. Mrs. Blau, who left us stewed kumquats on an iron stool like poison for raccoons. On the corner, Eddie Finn's uncle, an orthodontist, doled out apples and Johnson's dental floss. One door opens on Molly Seward's dad, still beak-nosed as Ichabod Crane, shuffling in Velcro-sealed slippers. His hearing aids whistle as though calling hounds. A fool I am to expect recognition. I do not tell my son, this man's daughter crushed my heart, not once, but twice, in 7th grade and in 9th. His wife, she is both ex and dead, served treats of a different sort to your grandpa. In the kitchen, my mother waits up for us, a widow in a threadbare robe, curlers twined, braced to comb tonight's sweet bounty for infected needles and razor blades. She had found them years ago, had she known where to look. Escheatment. Every winter we emptied the abandoned boxes. Come the February bank holiday, our branch manager, Mr. Teague, My first year, then flint-eyed Mr. Dawson, gathered the senior tellers at daybreak within the time-lock vault for a painstaking inventory. We generally worked in silence, save when confronted with oddities, a spent artillery shell, nude Polaroids of an overweight Hofstra sporting balaclava. Someone had wanted to protect these against fire, against nuclear winter. Someone sought to preserve a receipt from Rizzo's Oyster House, dated February 21st, 1963. One box contained a baby's cotton bib. Too often I matched a name with a face. Ida Lindstrom, who brought us dove-shaped gingerbread every Easter. The palsied pharmacist, Kovac, who left behind a kaleidoscope and pounds of worthless Slovak coins. And one year, that doddering snake called Babcock, who failed to understand compound interest, and twice sought to have me fired. His box held only an empty white gold locket and a sprig of verbena pressed in glass. The Cynic and Extremis. You could never put one over on my uncle. He whiffed the treachery in Girl Scouts, scoured his returned change for Canadian pennies, steered clear of con games like synagogue and life insurance. His college education he invested in a tire shop, listed in his wife's name. Who would send a woman to prison over taxes? His breath stank of canned tuna. His politics lacked mercy. Alger Hiss? Guilty. Julius Rosenberg? Guilty. Sacco and Vanzetti? More likely than not. His gut fed on the raw meat of vindication. One evening, a white girl from the college came round petitioning for a pair of jailed teens. Like the Scottsboro boys? He echoed. Boys were probably guilty of something. I visit him in the old veterans' home. My aunt is dead. Nobody else will go. 5-day stubble kills his submerged jaw. He welcomes me as though I am a Brinks guard serving him a sack of wooden nickels. Of course, you've come, he says, slapping his palm against the bedsheet. You were always a sucker. Comedy for the new millennium. Someday the Holocaust will be funny, like the Crusades, like the assassination of Julius Caesar, like Helen Keller reading The Waffle Iron. Dentists will tell jokes. Did you hear the one about boxcars? So these two elderly Jews, Moish and Pinchas, wander into an extermination camp. Yet jokes, no matter how clever, have a knack for turning stale. Children will groan and beat their fathers to the punchlines. Soon enough, 9/11 will be funny, like the Titanic, like the Hindenburg, a flaming barrel of incandescent laughs. So these hijackers, get this, they're going to commandeer 4 jets on the same day. Did I mention that they're Muslims? No? Well, they're Muslims. Guests will lean forward, expectant, waiting for the coup de grace, while sleeve-tugging kids demand, "What's a trade center?" Murder-suicide. We'd adjusted to the hollers, the slingshot accusations ricocheting over hollyhocks and peonies. Once, a squad car after midnight, a torn valise on the slate walk, men's clothes strewn across the broad clammy lawn, Oxford shirts, briefs, rumors of a child, barefoot, tapping snot-lipped on a neighbor's screen door. Every night for an entire summer, fathers, stripped to their sleep shirts, lean into the sweltering dark, contemplate shouting back, "Don't." Mothers tug tiny hands away from the carnage of socks and sweaters. For months afterwards, husbands attend to trifles. Dishes are washed without asking. Teenagers say "I love you" to their parents unprompted. A nephew appears, takes charge. Instantly, the mildewed shreds of menswear vanish. Painters in coveralls rejuvenate the siding. Do-gooders post letters to the Star Standard about mental health, gun control, alone. Men shudder with their own worst thoughts, at blows glimpsed but never landed. A reflexive shove, a grip to the throat, a vision of their lurking, cataclysmic potential. Anti-poem for an inaugural. I have tuned in to catch the words of the anointed, or so I claim. Because who among us watches an inauguration for the poem? Okay, I suppose there are a few purists who read Playboy for the prose, who drink whiskey for the flavor, but we measure our national pleasure in strikeouts, not stanzas. So we expect little from the anointed, and little is what we receive. Robert Frost in various shades of tan. Nobody invites Langston Hughes to stand behind the president and speak of dreams that stink like rotten meat. Nobody asks Allen Ginsberg to howl. Nobody atop the alabaster podium of democracy wants to hear Anne Sexton tell of Nazis stuffing live pigs into her mama's womb. So the rage of the gagged simmers with tight, balled fists far from those perfectly articulated tercets of glossy praise. Next time, somebody should raise the possibility that there is no hope left, that it is all used up, that our brightest days stand behind us, fleeing with limp, tails between scrawny legs. Next time, somebody should remind us that poetry is dead and the literacy rate is higher in Havana. Next time, somebody should cut off an ear. Next time, we should all place our names in an enormous hat and draw for the open mic. If there is a next time. First crush. That girl who left me breathless, once dead to me, now dead. Extinguished in a house fire in Brighton. How unremarkable the house looks on the television screen. The charred shutters and flame-gnawed siding. Ill-fit masks for the discount spool of Band-Aid days and carpool years, trimmed short so abruptly. The husband is giving interviews. One hand cradles a photograph of this woman whose body he has claimed. His arm covetous around her shoulders with the two daughters, Cheryl and the younger one, half orphans now, posed like war trophies. He will remarry, of course, quickly too. Who dares begrudge him that? Because one can love again, if never has one loved at 17. He will recall her tenderly. I will reach for her in the darkness, like a boyhood treasure lost behind a sofa. Irretrievable, forever inches beyond my fingertips. Yet, the center does not hold. Scourges sweep across the weary land, stamping man's imprimatur on man in blood and steel. Temperatures rise, foundations crumble, nations too. Fevers, fierce and tropical, hemorrhage through the eyes of entire armies. Heads on pikes around us, What has happened, and what yet must? Scalding white dust scorches like a sun, and yet we are here, in the park. A woman old enough to be your mother hawks half-charred rations scrounged from the pockets of corpses. The absence of songbirds pierces the morning like a bugle. Maggots feed on the flesh of schoolgirls, and yet I love you still. (1939) In the courtyard of the yeshiva at Lemberg, after a cloistering rain, the boys burgeon and rustle like barley. Drawn gleams of the high stained glass, tabernacle panels yet unshattered, swallows nest jittery under the eaves. At the drinking pump, earnest young teachers, in fringes and round rimless glasses, steady the crowns of their Hamburgs. Titters of nerves among the pupils, hormones, snickering, hands thrust into cotton pockets, toying marbles, apple cores, slingshots, the gout-hobbled rabbi who was only 45. Conclaves with his wife's loud imperial nephew, and the streets still with Germanic names and the cries of the city. The Eggman hawking, claw-voiced like a fowl, the horns and tires of motor cars. The knife shaver coaxing his deaf, bedeviled donkey from the muck. Surely appear the dawdlers. Red-eyed, dilly-dally, tremulous, a pudgy, indifferent lad kicking pebbles. Brothers of 12 and 13, sweat-mopped, buoyant, pride-slaked, that discarded tailor's dummy braced on the shoulders like a drunken mate, separated only by the beach mannequin and the 9 months that will determine who walks right and who walks left. A collective endeavor. Anyone on the platform might have taken the shove, a clipping stroke, really, but enough, had she not caught her uptown transfer, snouting into the car umbrella first. That persimmon-lipped waif might have shouldered the blow, or the stiff, gabardined businessman toying the skateboard. So easily we accept that a single contingency leads us to our fates. Not the failed algebra exam in 9th grade, the scraped knee hiking Yosemite, a dropped coin. Too little time decides the businessman. A rumble stirs the tunnel. And yet the strewn body insists to the last, lungs lapping, cataracts of blood below a deep-rent temple. Who can blame the waif for the squeezing shut her eyes? If the woman on the track had chance to muse, she'd say, "How long we have until we don't," which is what a young mother will realize briefly, wordlessly, before hurrying home to her brood. The pusher, grizzled, hardly human, will feel a pure rush of victory from his kidneys, although over whom or what he cannot ever say. A social work intern will give up riding trains in the morgue on the graveyard shift. A junior pathologist, unmarried, pushing 40, steering a jaw that protrudes like the prow of a great vessel, will note the victim's Caesarean scar, her chestnut nipples. Her boss will trace the contours of torpid colon to a shriveled pouch, vestige of a long burst appendix that should have proved fatal, but will embrace that timeless statistical canard. How lucky she was. Jury duty. A merciless August morning, yet our chamber is frigid as a post office. Lofty, majestic ceilings, cracked paint. walls guarded by the watchful, matted eyes of long-dead jurists in powdered, full-bottom wigs. The bailiff accepts our lunch orders, recommends against fish. Number 2 and number 9 wish to revisit testimony. That is treason to number 8, red-faced and sweating like a whiskey priest who has a business to run, and a hanging offense to number 6, who voices desperate concerns about her parking meter. The retired actuary, number 4, has grown drowsy, stuporous, and all the while I am madly in love with number 7, stunning, chestnut-haired number 7, whose father, I now know, spent 11 months locked up for insurance fraud. My nature and instincts lean toward acquittal number 7, who has said all of a few sentences in the 4 days that I have known her, who hardly realizes that number 3 exists, voices her conviction. Guilty. Instantly, I am in agreement, persuaded by her slight stammer, by the delicate goose flesh of her forearms. What value is a stranger's life, really, when love is at stake? Learning to discard. Those early years had been for gathering marbles, teacups, lanyards, truth, degrees and lovers, spouses, children. Space proves boundless in one's youth. No one warned us that to discard wants a fierce and ruthless drive. Wistfulness schemes with inertia to keep our treasured hoard alive. Yet attics full of cellars brimming stand no match for frailty's rout. Mementos yield to winter's tempest. Take what you want, the rest goes out. So man accumulates and discards, cleaving flesh down to the bone. Our flights of ego fade to nothing, our neighbor's nothing like our own. Homage to assimilation. I am the wicked son. I celebrate the Passover with bagels and bacon. I play lawn tennis in white shoes on the Sabbath. You should see my tattoos. What are these peculiar customs, I ask? Nail water? Capores? Circumcision? Like shackled hands clutching from the cold, dead earth of the shtetl? That is my ancestral homeland. Barren tracts of pale root vegetables. Lidfuck and Galicianer, bickering in Yiddish. Not some irrelevant patch of Middle East desert wrested from strangers. When my forebears prayed next year in Jerusalem, they meant only a better year in Grodno, in Dvinsk, in Lviv. The history of my people ended at Sobibor. Once the swastikas inevitably return, disguised as budded crosses or lions' heads or inverted exclamation points, I will stand at my mezuzah, free doorpost, objecting, Juden Rhein, Juden Rhein. The last laugh will be upon us both. Flying with clarity. Our flight attendant is older than I'm used to, maybe the oldest person on the flight. In fact, certainly old enough to know better. So when she announces that my seat cushion can double as a flotation device, that second mini amaretto urges me to rise like a royal herald and shout, no, it cannot. I mean, has anyone, anywhere in the history of aviation, ever survived a catastrophic failure by floating away on a sliver of nylon? Jesus Christ, lady. Has it never crossed your mind that steel tubes cruising 500 miles per hour don't just skim the ocean gracefully like cormorants? No, they sink, sink, sink. You'd be swimming with the fishes around Davy Jones' locker. If you survived the impact, which you wouldn't because you're old and out of shape and not made of graphene, and if by some miracle you did manage to grab hold of your cushion and paddle unscathed through the field of debris, hypothermia would kick in. Soon enough, and in 3 minutes, your rheumatic, ice-stiff fingers would lose their grip on that precious flotation device of yours. And you'd go the way of TWA and Pan Am and everyone else in your damn line of work who'd thought themselves unsinkable. I say none of this, of course, and sit placid as a madman, doped in Thorazine, nursing my third amaretto, while you indicate the floor lights that will lead us, in case of emergency, from this lunacy into the dark, wintry waters beyond. Assembling the exercycle. Depicted on the box in pristine gleam, a resplendent, full-armored steed, alluring as Sinone's gift to the Trojans. I feel 10 pounds lighter just admiring the steel bolts that will lock together, harmonized as enzyme and substrate. A blueprint of dashes steers me forward, like a pilgrim pursuing the one truth path. Only that path, it turns out, requires a size 3 Phillips head screwdriver, and using a size 0 for a substitute. Gnaws off the drives, moreover. 4 pillow blocks and 2 flange bearings connect on the diagram, while the bag contains 3 of each, and no sane human being could ever distinguish a left-bearing cup from her right companion. Sweat eats its way through my shirt, trickles down my flank, on a trial. Run, the front wheel emits a wheezing sound like an untreated asthmatic, followed by a dull moan that recalls tortured Puritans beneath pressing boards. Nameless, unclaimed pieces jangle inside my pockets, reminding me that I will not exert myself so vigorously again until, years hence, in a burst of spring cleaning, I dust the damn machine with a damp cloth and haul its treacherous corpse to the curb. Transaction costs. The postman knows secrets. Magazines sheathed in black plastic. Final warnings, notices of default. Overwrapped packages that rattle pharmaceutically one morning. Inside a Ziploc bag, he delivers, a crushed Marshall Aid. All shards of fluorescent pink and yellow, marked damage in transit. Maybe that is what keeps him going. Day after day, year after tedious year, performing in a role that we never could, like collecting coins at a toll plaza. He slips among us, hardly noticed, humming on torrid August mornings, hirsute brown calves, strained and sweat-soaked below his regulation shorts, slipping from his water canister. He lingers beneath an open window. Our voices, like power, drift to him on the hot summer breeze. Reckoning. Some unpardonable transgression. Paperclips gouged into an electric socket. Maybe mothballs choking the boy's toilet has led us to this Armageddon. My parents togged out as for synagogue or a funeral, driving through the dense October gloom to meet Miss Stoutwald. Miss S. is months away from hanging up her final paper snowflake in the pumpkin she wields through the annual Halloween tribute to Ichabod Crane. I encounter her twice. In retirement, a decade later, home from college, I will run into her waiting at the bagel shop, where she calls out to me by my full name, and I realize she must have been pretty in her youth, and that her girlfriend is actually her girlfriend. 4 more years pass. She beams at me from the obit page of the Post. To her, my parents too are children. I ride in the back seat of our Buick, which smells of damp beagle and acetone, fearing the price that Miss S will exact from them from my wrongdoing. Caveat. Nobody mentioned in this poem is based upon anyone, living or dead, especially my Uncle Wayne, a first-rate SOB who decked his own mother one Thanksgiving, skimming her dental plates over the cranberry sauce, and who had to be bailed out by his future ex-son-in-law. Any resemblance to real persons is purely coincidental, including my fifth-grade teacher, Miss Prott, who said I'd end up in a delinquent for feeding crayons to her hamster and flashing Molly Crandall, but later surrendered her license after fondling a 12-year-old girl at a DAR picnic. Any mention of Amy Pullman, who jilted me without a tear after I paid her way through 4 years of veterinary school, might open me up to charges of defamation, except defamation is false, while Amy actually did have a fling with my brother on the way out. As though I care enough to hold a grudge, or would ever afford that bitch the satisfaction of uttering her blighted name in a poem, which I have not done. Blind date with a poet. Most poets remain unknown to me personally, long dead, or distant, or too old to engage. Inexorable precursors like bedrock and telephone wires. The few I do know from schools or cafes, or chit-chat over hors d'oeuvres, prove familiar and cloying, like my parents' house in the suburbs. How exquisite to discover the rhythms of a poet I've never met, but soon will. Maybe only once. Precipitation. 2 evenings at the twilight of the war. For Jews and Germans, there is only one war. Human ash rained across Prussia's heartland, or what remained of it. From the crematoria at Chelmno, a rare north wind dappled Elbing's fallow market. Danzig's scorched husks, the muddy, shell-struck lanes of Königsberg, where Kant had taught theology to Herder. Urchins hawked umbrellas door to door. In Carthage, the Japanese consul, passing through by train, wrote to his wife of the cherry blossoms at Mount Dago. Housewives crossed themselves as children caught snowflakes on their tongues. Family tree. Those questions that I thought too late to ask. Grandma's maiden name, her mother's hometown, the ship that carried her father from his hard-earthed Russian shtetl across the Atlantic, all now glower from my daughter's burgeoning schematic as ominous chasms. My wife, a Yankee, once a Protestant, is a fifth-grade genealogist idol. She can trace forebears to colonial baptisms, chart cousins many times removed, and circuits binding far-slung transistors. We Jews have only memory to link us. A voice stilled effaces generations. A branch forgotten is expunged forever, like ashes lost to the breeze. Blackberry winter. April flutters in on the plumes of warblers. Blackberry winter. April flutters in on the plumes of warblers, whispers through hyacinth lips, scents the nursery with lilac and verbena. My father, near the far cusp of his vigor, mulches at daybreak, catalogs tubers, transplants peonies into plastic trays. He keeps one cagey eye on our patrons, another upon my future, his only wish, a sham dream that I too may sow. He laments, washing calloused palms. The earth wants another poet, like a crone gall, like downy mildew, like Dutch elm disease. Then a cruel north wind spites the earth, glazes begonia buds, lacquers iris beards, azalea strain under a chainmail of ice. Bundled in winter sweaters, Papa surveys his lost bounty, all those frost-stiff lilies, all that squandered hope. My sister remarries. We have trodden this road before, like alpine ramblers out for a jaunt, who crash an early blizzard and circle again to the foot of a once numinous peak. My sister forgoes lace for a tea-length puce gown of no-nonsense gabardine. Her hand-me-down groom, vaunting girth and pate, brims bonhomie too much as though captaining a yacht. A surviving uncle plays father to the bride. Nothing is said of angelic schemes, of destiny bound at ensoulment. No word of who will die first. Heir to Hippocrates. My father rises from cold water nothing to tend the kidneys of stars and nephrons and glomeruli. He discovers silver vessels, mines gold veins. 1 year he scores a transplant for the governor, whose wife calls in the nervous dawn to talk creatinine and clyosporin levels. Gourmet baskets crowd the kitchen. Signed by billionaires and Olympians, A-list celebrities call him Doc. A limousine, long as a jumbo jet, arrives in the darkness to speed my old man to Washington. I will come along, he cautions. His joyless, ear-pierced escorts. Mom is in labor with my sister. What choice do these men have? The Doc, the almighty Oz, has spoken. I must wait in the antechamber, surrounded by high-backed chairs under portraits of world leaders, chaperoned by a wizened butler and a bosom, bright-eyed agent. They claim, she whispers over my drowsy head, that he saved the Pope and Queen Elizabeth. Her companion shrugs, chuckles. The Queen's valet is still a valet, he says. I curse his words, but my father more. Distinctions. Too young to see the faint, deep line between commerce and affection, I befriended the milkman, the paper hanger, the 2 aging men my grandmother paid $20 weekly to vacuum and scrub. Ed, grizzled, bearded, called me boss, saluting as I passed. Roy, clean-shaven, boasted an artificial incisor green as a pistachio nut. Every Friday they mopped and scoured, yet somehow left the house no cleaner. One Friday morning, Ed arrived alone. He lugged buckets from his dog-eared Packard station wagon. Wheezing, feet hobbled by invisible chains. In a Harlem hospital lay his partner. Stroke out and mute struck. We should visit him, I urged my grandmother. Adorable, just adorable, she replied, repeating the words to my aunt, words she find again that spring, when I begged to take an injured songbird who thumped her parlor window to a veterinarian. On holiday. This particular blow-up, same as all the others, yet distinct. We've pulled into a Ramada lot outside Frankfort, Kentucky, or a Motel 6 in Georgia. Some place between places. Vacancies but 2 stories up. The lobby's incandescent glare cannot blind my mother to the inferno that awaits us in the darkness. Flames gnawing through curtains like moths. lungs flooding with toxic smoke. Swan dives from balconies. She insists upon a ground floor room. Voiced raise, as though my father and the clerk, a gum-snapping teen, are in conspiracy. We stop for supper en route to the next motel. My sister dozes into her mac and cheese, across placemats. Our parents clasp hands, road raw and heat sapped, still capable of mistaking peace for joy. Solid ground. In the parking lot of the Laurendale Mall, we pause to watch the excavation of a fort where colonial militiamen, armed only with pride and plug bayonets, repulsed a redcoat onslaught. On a tarp lay shards of cloudy glass. Pewter spoons, ramrods, musket stocks, guarded by a sweet-stained co-ed, half your age. So young to be so serious, like those Pennsylvania farm boys willing to die for Mad Anthony Wayne, and a vague sense of honor, and a patch of asphalt behind the A&P. How pleased these urban diggers look, as though they've hit bottom. That's good science, too. Claim what you've sought, not more. Everything below is complication. Pre-Columbian mounds, mammoth horns, time capsules from the Pleistocene, much like all above. A shopping cart marooned on a traffic island. A discarded aluminum crutch. Impressions of our feet side by side. Bad news from God. A girthy pamphleteer at the bus station proclaims good news from God. Not for you. Not pushing 62. No more imagined headlines, summits with prime ministers, not even fleeting, fizzy promises inked in yearbooks. All that remains are snippets, alumni magazines. Then one final notice, survived by, in lieu of, and maybe the same for everyone. In their way, holocausts, plagues, novel routes to come undone, or alone, diminished, days fused in an unrecorded dirge, without affair or consequence. No news at all. Our dog turns 18. Should we cater a bar mitzvah? We settle for peanut butter pup cakes, pumpkin bacon crisps, little need for a fog machine. It's no birth date. After all, no anniversary of arrival, just an arbitrary day on the calendar, chosen to assuage our 10-year-old, now 18 and away at school. 18. That's 46,000 dog days, nested inside human years like Russian dolls. My girl laughs as I narrate his canine feast. Tongue and oiled spatula, slathering, frosting, metronomic tail wagging toward infinity. Neither knows what is coming. On the sudden death of a beloved acquaintance. Frayed white coat slack around your girth. Pockets lumped with tuning fork, reflex hammer, corned beef sandwich, cloaked in wax paper. You might have been the cheese man at the gourmet market, not our virtuoso neurologist. And when you harangued the medical students that first morning, or at least the first morning our paths clashed, opposite the elevator bay, eager minds a huddle, sponging for wisdom. I listened to you rail against polio vaccination, the pernicious influence of fluoridated water, Marxist conspiracies behind zip codes, and until that benighted open grin suffused. Your leonine features, I too shared the fear that, in escaping the psych ward, you'd clubbed the real Dr. Forrest to oblivion. Now you're dead, not a friend, hardly a colleague, merely a fellow physician with whom I shared a sporadic patient. An occasional joke, yet unearned grief pools like blood in my throat. So much life squandered on lukewarm associations, the tonsured clerk in the post office, our shank-eyed receptionist, Uncle Sol. They vanish, and the space fills quickly. How few leave a lasting hole in the ether. Variations on a Holocaust. From a veiled window overlooking the Prinsengrot, Anne and Margot observe the security service patrol. Gather on the cobblestones, field grays and peaked caps, luster and sweat. A captain with mismatched epaulets. The girls crouch on dust bags of unsold meat seasoning, pulses stampeding, nostrils tickled by stale paprika. But the Germans storm a different annex, a stone bay behind a haberdasher's where my grandmother hides among the surplus corset laces and tailor's dummies. My grandmother keeps no diary. She is a full-blown woman, war-widowed. Her son shipped to the English countryside for safekeeping like a cache of documents or royal artwork. Most days she knits, unfinished wool, abandoned amid want, her neck scarf to reach her cousins. In America, the haberdasher's daughter comes Tuesdays with potatoes, water, scurrility. Then the Germans arrive with clops on the stair planks. Clamor. She is surprised. In the street lurk other annexes, other Jews. Why hers? Anne rises on a gentle May morning to joyous discord, light infantry, Canucks, serenading the long-fought sudden peace. When the lights go on again, croon boys who know precisely enough Dutch to demand surrender or to purchase a ripened cheese. Yet there is no cheese, hardly a city. From the steerage deck of the Carpathia, she twigs the scape of the devastation, sheared steeples, skeletal facades, public footage for a private newsreel, and a throb of horror, her journal mislaid on the quay. My grandmother sends a letter, smuggled half a page between the missives of two other deportees, matrons who share only a point of departure, train passengers delayed overnight in an unfamiliar station. A Frisian girl carries the note to a work camp in Upper Saxony. Everything after those scrawled lines is, by necessity, speculation. The boxcars from East, from Westerbork, tattooing, delousing, scabies, rats, typhus expunged again when Hungarian capos set Belson's files aflame. After the wall collapses, in my family there is only one war. One war. Papa meets up with the Frisian girl in Leipzig. Now she's also a grandmother. Wed to a retired magistrate awash in drink and disillusion. From memory, she gives voice to all three women, unable to recall who penned which farewell. Anne outlives Otto. Edith, Margaret, never marries. Anne outlives Otto and Edith. Margot never marries. You may have passed her adrift in a public park, wearing the stench of want and pennies on her astringent skin. Shrinking with doubt, a torch-eyed girl seized mid-breath on a public bus by the voices of restive gods cries out against iniquity, and I reward her plea with 50 milligrams of Thorazine. How flavored she is to be born unto our scientific wonders, not into that dark era when a young Orleans maid, called by the same volatile gods, was set ablaze at the stake. Of course, St. Joan saved France. I dare not ask my patients, is this the voice that called Abraham down to Canaan? Moses forth from Egypt? Jesus to Jerusalem? The girl knows I know her secret. Satan lurks in a syringe, shot by shot. We cure ourselves of salvation. Example. He lectures the medical students on boundaries. Let's say I'm treating Lena Turner. In this hypothetical, he soon plans to seduce her. Funny because implausible. Implausible because she is dead. Funnier and less plausible had she had been living. Pin-up girls fall not for doughy, bejeweled endocrinologists pushing 70. Nary a smile among his protege of Gallon, their precociously fret-bitten faces blank as radishes. Some must wonder if he meant Tina, not Lena, or maybe that's a distinction lost. For them, the Beatles, Bing Crosby, and Beethoven belong to the same generation. Lena, a name made up, or might as well be. Jane Mansfield, even Garbo, fare no better. Time contracts with distance, like shadow beyond a peephole. Charlemagne and Chaucer cleaved by centuries, yet both medieval. His own grandfather had suitored an aide who had once served Meade at Gettysburg, remote today as Bosworth Field, or nearly so. And when he joined the faculty, newly minted and wed, he braces his office door with a chair, meeting female students. Now only a pervert might doubt his aims. The closed door, not a boundary, but a chasm. The homely girls. 3 days into the school year, her 13th, and already she divines the full-grown men and women marked to inherit these slight torsos, these paste-slathered 6-year-old hands, like Polynesian navigators, sighting distant vessels in the lap of a single wave, or the crystal-eyed field marshal who reads an army's fate and an empire's in far-off plumes of cannon smoke. She listens as their tiny piping voices pledge allegiance to one nation, indivisible, watches them all and show tadpoles and shards of mica, studies their delicate, implausible features, and she knows which among her phalanx of rubber band snappers and nail-biters will bring the planets to heel, or will at least try, and which among her fragile-souled, hope-chalked charges the universe will grind beneath its wheels like road salt. In one boy's handshake, she can feel herself purchasing aluminum siding, or a late-model Cadillac, or 6 billion pounds sterling of bearer bonds, and she will share these impressions on open school night. Other revelations beg more discretion. Her 2 Michaels, B and W, a dark, mischief-grinned Lothario needing only the dashboard to start counting his notches, and a rusty-mopped tub with the panache of an embryonic podiatrist. But boys, even stunted sops, remain boys. Girls weigh upon her, catty, cliquish creatures whose feral friendships will sort themselves out along inexorable lines. Pretty and pretty enough in plain. Soon the girls who are nearly pretty will drop their necklines, their panties, their expectations. The homely girls will steel their scorned faces, clench their uninviting lips, and manage contingencies. For instance, teaching kindergarten. Yet she promises them they can yet become princesses. Her task to protract this fleeting carefree interval between who these girls never were and who they never will be. Snow again. Raging against the grisly dawn, shoulders burning and cheeks aflame, yet the drive still a sea of level white. I spot a child's nose pressed against the neighbor's glass. My dormant, ice-braced shovel stands a yardstick by which to measure work undone, and yet undoing. Only scrapes from my neighbor's dig mar our reveries. His child dreaming of igloo forts and ammunition globes, while he anticipates a future frigid morn when his sun will glow into his labors, when he will watch with his own nose, pressed to the same frost-latticed glass, cozy in the pride of a job well done. That's the crick with kids and shoveling. They do for a while, then they don't.